morning, everybody. It's very exciting for me to be delivering a program after following so many of the fantastic speakers that Ari brings to the screen and to this group. So let's jump into the topic. I will talk about the past, Jewish past of Barcelona. We will see a little bit of today's city in a walk that I put together with slides. But we're not talking about today's Jewish life in this opportunity, in this occasion. To understand a little bit about the geopolitics of Spain, let me tell you that in the Middle Ages, when we're talking about Spain, it's not Spain yet. The Iberian Peninsula used to be a Roman province, then a Visigothic region, and then the Muslim arrival turned it into a caliphate eventually. And to stop the expansion of the Muslim world in the 800s, the Franks in France, let's say the Frankish kings, established a Hispanic march to, to make a barrier. Barcelona was part of the Frankish domains at that time. You see Barcelona here, and it was the capital of a county. Eventually, in the 1100s, you start having kingdoms, Christian kingdoms conformed and take over, and Barcelona will eventually be part of what will be the Kingdom of Aragon. This will be the largest expression of that kingdom. The rest of the peninsula was basically Castile and Portugal, which was another kingdom. Navarra was another kingdom. By 1492, when Jews were kicked out from Spain, this was more or less the picture of Spain and Portugal on the west, with a little bastion, Muslim bastion, which was a Caliphate of Granada that capitulated to the kings Isabel and Ferdinand. Barcelona had several walls founded by Romans, the White Wall, the 15 BCE, the second wall after the main expansion in the 1200s, corresponding with the expansion of the Kingdom of Aragon. Barcelona's port attracted lots of people to work and to find jobs here. And the third wall that was built in the 1300s, incidentally paid for with taxes, additional taxes collected by the king from his Jews. And I say his Jews because we were usually known as the king's property, the king's serfs, and kings would protect us. Now, how far back can we place Barcelona's Jewish presence? So we have to go to documents or to artifacts. And in this case, I'm going to refer to records, not all found in Spain, but references to Jewish life in Barcelona. This is a downtown photograph with the Montjuïc on the left. It's a main park of Barcelona today, a hill where the Jewish cemetery used to be. And Montjuïc means Mount of the Jews. And these are the two Jewish quarters in the oldest part of town. Those who have been to Barcelona, which is most of you, this is La Rambla. Of course, you remember. In the mid-800s, there's a responsa sent by the Gaon of Sura, of the yeshiva in Sura, to the Jews in Barcelona, who asked him about the proper timing for a bracha over the wine. So that means there's a community seriously settled here who needs advice. A piece of land sold on the Montjuïc, not in the area of the cemetery, refers to this property being on the Monte Judaigo, which refers to the Mount of the Jews. So it's already, this hill is already called the Hill of the Jews, meaning there's some Jewish activity there. A property sold in 1072 will refer to the property being by a road leading to the Jewish cemetery. So we know that what's happening there is the Jews buried on that hill. And much later, in 1368, and if you notice the date is after the Black Plague, explosion of the Black Plague, which started in 1348, A community in the southern part of Aragon, in the city of Tortosa, writes to the king asking for more land for their cemetery because with the sudden losses to the plague, they have no more room to bury. And they refer to Barcelona having very old graves, more than 500-year-old, which brings us back to the mid-800s, which is what I started explaining. So we have to say that for now, with the information we have, there is Jewish life in Barcelona since the 800s. We do not know their names. We do not know exactly where they came from, very likely from other lands or territories in France, in the southern part of France. And Jews are always relocated, invited, attracted to cities when the rulers, counts or kings need development. I need to say that the Jews first lived outside the old city. The old city was basically, this is half of the old city where I'm pointing with a mouse. And they lived outside the walls like most of the population. Later on, when the city starts growing, they will be moved into the city walls. So the black line represents the Roman walls of the city. The left half of the wall is sandwiched in between buildings, and the right side of the wall can almost be seen in its totality. The two main streets are accessed by 4 gates at each end, at all ends, let's say, and they defined 4 quarters. The 2 streets remain today higher up than in the Roman times. And when the Jews are moved into the city, which is in the 1000s, mid-1000s, they will occupy most of this neighborhood, which was already built. And it was closed on the straight sides, only accessible from the main street, from the Red Street. All the streets in the old city in the Middle Ages, construction built or made above the level of the Roman city, most of the streets are cul-de-sacs. But while most of the neighborhoods within this area have the names of parishes, this neighborhood took the name of a call, of a cul-de-sac. The word call means cul-de-sac in Catalan. So this neighborhood was called a call. On the opposite side, we have the center of power, the cathedral, the church represented there, and the royal or the count's palace, and later the royal palace, which are both entities holding power at that time. The minor Jewish quarter was established between the first and the second walls at the request of the Jewish community when the expansion of the city in the 1200s, thanks to the importance of the port and the activity that it produced and attracted, caused the growth of the population, Jewish and non-Jewish, and Jews needed another place to continue growing. The king allows for this establishment, and at the same time, he allows for gates at the entries, which were requested by the Jews, because in the 1200s, just as the population was growing, the city, the kingdom, the port, everything was growing, why not the church? The church was also growing, and in the 1200s, the church established the preaching orders that were doing a lot of work to get more adepts to the faith and also defamating Jews at the same time. So the violence towards Jews increased. Through records, royal records, notary records, property records, we know there were 5 synagogues. None of them are standing today. None. I said none, and we can discuss it later. We know there were the butcher with the special permit to slaughter animals in the way we do, observing the kashrut, social service center, and a study center. When we arrive today, at this intersection, there's more or less off this intersection, there's the main government square, Plaza San Jaume, and the government center shifted from where it used to be on this quarter to this intersection. We have the Generalitat, is the regional government facing the city hall. When we move into this neighborhood, the first time in the mid-1000s, approximately there were 300 Jews who settled there. And we probably chose that area because it offered more vacant property to rent or buy. We were not told to live in there. We were not told to close ourselves. There were no ghettos, ever, ever. At the time of maximum growth, the Jewish population reached 4,000. In a city, the city of Barcelona had a population of 32,000. So we were 12% of the total population. Nonetheless, the taxes we contributed with to the king represented 22%. So you can understand the importance and the heavy weight of our tax paying, which was different than anybody else's. I want to explain the relationship between the different groups in society, mainly referring to what I said before, the kings and the court, the rulers and the church. Kings owned us. We were paying taxes only exclusively to kings. We did not pay taxes, municipal taxes, and obviously we did not pay money to the church. Tithe was not expected from us, and this is very easy to understand that the church was after their proselytism, converting Jews so that they could increase their numbers and they could collect more money. So kings and church were fighting for the same income from the Jews, and the kings were also Catholic, but they wanted the Jews to continue being Jewish. Otherwise, they couldn't be at their service, exclusively at their service. Jews belonged in the Jewish community. There were all classes represented. There were the poor, the middle classes, the artisans, the business people, and the wealthy. And we also had the scholars that were also working, not only as scholars, as I will explain later. Because of our education, 100% of the Jewish population was literate, while 80% of the non-Jewish population was illiterate. So you can understand that because of our education, our loyalty to the rulers, we were trusted by the court for all kinds of services. What kinds of professions and activities we performed? All and everything, probably everything. There are no records of Jews in fishing. We were not fishermen, but we were in all kinds of arts and crafts. Or craftsmanship. There are some objects found, some findings that speak to this, but most of the information comes through records, through notary records, commercial records. Coral was used by jewelers. These rings were found in graves when they opened up the cemetery. Potters, fragments of hanukiot, which are standard, found throughout Spain when they excavate Jewish quarters. Bookbinders, appraisers of vessels, people who issued insurance bonds for merchandise that was going to be shipped somewhere, woodwork, mattresses, making mattresses and blankets, bleachers, working with leather straps that were necessary for bundles, etc. All kinds of activities. Scribes, bookbinders, as I said, parchment makers, ink makers, and we worked for ourselves and for the rest of the society, not exclusively for ourselves. Many of us were involved in healthcare, doctors, midwives, nurses, and we all practice, they all practice, I wasn't there then, they all practice money lending. Money lending was a must basically in the Jewish world because the church needed intermediaries for being able to lend money to Christians, charging an interest. This is something that within the Christian world cannot be done, within the Jewish world or the Muslim world cannot be done. You cannot charge an interest to a brother or sister in the same faith. So they stipulated that Jews would do the money lending. So they could receive money from Christians and lend to other Christians. The interest was established by the kings, and it was about 1% a month. And of course, a big chunk of that revenue was returning to the kings in the shape of business taxes. Forgot to show this. We were also weavers. And this is a pattern for a piece of textile, woven textile. They found little dice in excavations in the Jewish quarter. So we were manufacturing dice, playing dice for poker, whatever the game was in those days. So going back to money lending, even rabbis lent money. There are many scholars throughout Spain in different periods, in different regions. But just to name a few from Barcelona, the earliest name of a scholar who was a translator and a poet also is Isaac ben Reuben. Around the same time, there was this very important scientist, a rabbi who introduced concepts that were very common and very well known in the Muslim world, very advanced in algebra and physics, astronomy, astrology, and mathematics. He introduced pi, the perimeter of the circle, trigonometry. He wrote books teaching all these things. These books crossed the Pyrenees and eventually reached the rest of Europe, Central and Northern Europe. And these are books that were used to study by the scientists in the Renaissance. And in many cases, these scientists were persecuted by the Inquisition, accused of going against faith principles, like Galileo, for instance. Yehuda ben Barzillai, another Talmud commentator, translators of text, Jewish texts written in Arabic previously. Shmuel Hazardi, we are going to refer to him. He was a business person, but a member of the Beit Din who wrote a code of business law, which transcended. So it was copied and copied often. And Shlomo ben Adret was probably the most important figure in the Jewish world in Barcelona, who eventually positioned Barcelona as the heart of Jewish responsa, because at his adult age, he received questions and consultations from all around the Mediterranean. His reputation made him be known as the Rashba, the Ha-Rashba, and his teachings we still study and they inspire students today. Hasdai Crescas was probably the last important figure who lived in Barcelona, because I say the last because Barcelona's Jewish presence ended abruptly after the pogroms of 1391 that I'm going to refer to a little later. And he, Hasdai Crescas, was a witness to these pogroms. Just to show you some documents of what, these are very special, they're not notary documents. The one on the right is a ketubah that is in the Royal Archives. And the only reason this personal document, family document can be in the Royal Archives could be that we know that the couple converted and they probably tendered the documents that would be otherwise a proof of being Jewish as a sign of total loyalty to the new faith they embraced. Like they give up their wedding document, they give up anything that connects them to Judaism. And the book on the page on the left belongs to an astronomy chart book commissioned by the King of Aragon, as he was very interested in sciences. I want to refer to the name Jacob ben David Bonjour, bonjour if you know French, buongiorno if you know Italian, corresponds to the Hebrew name Yom Tov. We find a lot of these translations into local languages, oftentimes in Catalan, because Jews in Barcelona spoke Catalan with everybody else. Astruga, like Moshe married to Astruga comes from Astruk, which is mazal, luck, fate. There were those Jews that were artists. In this kind of art, we're going to talk about art later, but Abraham and Yehuda, father and son, they lived in the island of Majorca, which is, it's represented here. You see like the flag of Catalonia, and they ran a cartography studio. The King of Aragon, Peter IV, will commission this map of the world. I only bring the Mediterranean so that you have a much better representation, otherwise it would be too small, but it is, you can see where I go with my mouse, like a seam, it's put together like a Torah scroll, parchment fragments going from the Atlantic, which is on our left, to the Pacific. It's heavily illuminated, and it marks all the points on the coast that are little ports or larger ports. This was to be a present to the King Charles V of France. So the original of this map is kept at the Saint-Geneviève Library in Paris. So I kind of laughed when I said art, because there were no Jewish artists in the way we know we can speak of fine arts. Because normally in those days, there were no still lifes, there was no abstract painting. Painting and art was representing court scenes or church scenes, and we are not going to paint saints, of course not. And we are not going to paint kings either, because it would be idolizing them. We cannot represent figures. But there are, sorry, why did I do this? Okay. There are Haggadot that were made in Barcelona, and it's been very well studied by historians, Jewish and non-Jewish, who can tell that the way the drawings are made correspond to one or another fine artist of the period, 14th century. All of these are made in the 1300s. Actually, I bring 3 examples, but there are 14 of them in England, one in Catalonia, one in Budapest, in Hungary, one in Israel, 2 in New York. And these are the photograph albums of the times, because although they may have increased the level of richness, these represented in the interiors of the buildings and the costumes, etc., these books cost a fortune, because these books were commissioned by wealthy families to the artists of the times that were working for the church and for the kings. We can see garments, we can see the interiors of the houses. This is showing musicians. This is showing the bima in the center, elevated from the rest of the synagogue, the hanging glass oil lamps, that some of them were found in the southern part of Spain in excavations. Not everybody is reading from the book. Some of the people in the public, let's say, have a book, the rest are listening, etc. We can see a lot and analyze a lot of the details. Now, these Haggadot left Spain with the families when they went to the Ottoman Empire, very likely, or most of them, and eventually they ended up being sold to collectors, and they are today in different museums or collections in the world. So I insist these drawings are made by non-Jewish artists, the same artists that were painting for the church. And why do I show you this drawing? Because, as I said before, the artists of the times worked for the church and for the kings, and there's a lot of church altar pieces that represent, as I said, the photographs of the times, the proselytism of the preaching orders. We're going to see an enlargement of that panel, which shows the church preaching in the synagogue. In this case, it is the figure of Saint Stephen, that is the altarpiece. And the kings allowed the priests to go in the synagogues and preach to the Jews that are gathered there. So it's very interesting to look at their faces. Some elder will argue, presenting their text written in Hebrew. Some elder will decide to destroy and shred our texts, meaning they are going to convert. Some younger ones don't want to listen, like here, and some are arguing, some are shredding the paper. This is a very striking image, and there are many of them, many altar pieces. When I go to any church or to any museum, to the Gothic collection section, I always look for the Jews in the painting, and they're always there. It's really amazing. In some of those panels, we can see, of those altar pieces, we can see how Jews had to be identified with a badge, this yellow and red circle, which if you were at the service of the court, you could pay a fee to not have to wear that, because it's highly humiliating. In other panels, you can see these accusations illustrated clearly. Jews desecrate the holy shapes. This is the host. And in other in another panel, it's not just the desecration of the holy shape, but Jews boil or cook or do strange rituals with Catholic children. When you see the halo around the head, this is a Catholic child. In this case, you can see a Jewish woman with a head, a fair head wear or headband, as was typical of Jewish women those days. So the accusations that Jews were doing these horrible things, besides having killed Jesus, started strongly in the 1200s with the arrival of the preaching orders. And they continued all the way into the 1300s. And in the 1300s, when the Black Plague broke up, the accusations were, this is caused by the Jews who throw poison in the wells. Although the Pope had clearly said, this cannot be said because Jews die as well, and it is true, we died as well of the plague, the accusations continued. And also they served the local priests to reinforce their power and to attract more people to the church. What happened is that the end of the 1300s, in 1391, the plague was still going up and down, and all the efforts that specifically referring to the lowest classes in the Christian world, all the efforts they were doing, putting time aside to go to church, giving money to pay their tithe, etc., were not giving any return. And everybody was frustrated, of course, but the peasants, the lowest classes, were more frustrated because it was very hard for them. And they started threatening the priests that they are going to drop out. So in Seville, in 1391, the first priest to give a clear message to keep his Christian congregants in the church and not drop out was telling them that the problem is that the problem that you don't see any return is that the Jews live in the heart of our cities. So God has been sending help since day one, since you started praying and asking for it, but the Jews block it. Let me tell you that when Jews are attracted to live inside the city, the old part of the city, the urban part of the city, not the suburban part, the cities are very small. And later, the cities continue to grow in a concentric way. So Jews will always be in the heart of the city. But this argument helped the priest to keep their people. Nonetheless, with all the attacks and all the persecutions, many Jews chose to convert. And with these messages that priests were giving, the mobs got organized. And in 1391, there were pogroms going across and around the kingdoms of Spain and attacking Jewish communities. The result of those pogroms were many people were killed and many decided to convert, not because it was the only choice. It was the only possible choice that they could envision to have a life and continue raising a family. So I bring just a short list of names. When you convert, you change your name. You don't want to be called, I don't know, in this case, it's not super clear, but Shlomo Goldstein, if you're going to be Catholic. You understand what I'm saying. So let me use this list to explain, for instance, Vidal Abravini. Vidal would be the Catalan name for Jaim. Vida is life in Spanish. Vidal would be Jaim Abravini. Adret, the third name, Abraham Adret, was converted probably on the Monday of the attack. This is from Barcelona. Barcelona was attacked August 5, 1391, and it ended on August 8. He took the name Lunes as his family name. One of the cartographers in Mallorca converted. Masot Evangena, one of the most important and influential members of the Jewish community, a very important business person who had a synagogue of his own built in 1375. By 1391, he decides to convert. Obviously, some of those converts would practice in hiding. It's very difficult to know, or very difficult to ascertain, because although there are the confessions at the Inquisition, some of those confessions are just to be how do you say, to minimize the torture, so that you will admit to these practices and you will be given another opportunity. So they're not honest confessions. It's not that you're truly practicing. But this little book that I brought on the right picture was found within a wall, hidden inside a wall of a building built in 1600 that was demolished in 1800s in the Jewish quarter. This is a couple of pages. The book starts with the explanation of the calendar and the holidays, main holidays in the calendar. It is in Catalan. This is transcribed, typewritten by a researcher who studied this book. It is full of mistakes, inversions, and errors. It is obviously a book made by converts by memory of what they remembered without any supervision, and for converts. We do not know who wrote it. It is probably from the 1400s. So that attack in Barcelona in 1391 represented the end of a community. The personal properties were sold to Christian owners. There is a record of the passing on of the property. It's a very valuable book where you find the names of the old Jewish owners and the new Christian owners, and that allows to reconfigure the map of the neighborhood and the population of the neighborhood at that time. It's a picture, a still picture of a snapshot of 1394 or so. The records of the community are recycled, because if you move away, you move to another city, you're not going to schlep all the paper with you. There are lots of paper that stays. It is recycled in the bindings, glued together to be inside the bindings of public notary books. And when historians, this work is being done throughout Europe, public notary books bound in the period right after the disappearance of a community are full of records from the community, very clearly written and readable, that give testimony of doctor's notes, Beit Din decisions, etc. The cemetery, which was one of the community, you're gonna laugh, why did I bring that picture? Let me finish. The community properties are confiscated, let's say, or they fall in the hands of the crown, who will dispose of them. The Jewish cemetery was given to an order of the church, who eventually ends up selling it, and it gets to be subdivided. Think about it, it's from 1400s until the 1900s, when Jews start coming back to Spain, it is 500 full years that there's no Jewish burial there. So all sorts of activities like an amusement park was being built and functioned, operated on top of our graves. I have a full presentation about the cemetery, which is very interesting and deserves a chapter of its own. By 1492, there are no Jews in Barcelona, but there's Jews all over the place. And the conditions of the life after the pogroms of 1391 were very difficult. I sometimes say, I don't know why didn't they leave before. It must have been that there was no safe place to go to. Spain still seemed to be the best place to be in. The Queen Isabel and King Ferdinand decide to do this joint venture when they get married. They don't merge the kingdoms, but they do rule on the same territory. And by 1492, they decide that Jews are a nuisance. They are mingling and messing up with the Christians, and we are never going to have this uniform society that we want to. And they come up with this edict of expulsion that has very harsh wording. I will also send it to you with the material, the after presentation material, very, very harsh wording. And as you can see, if you read these paragraphs, we are disrupting the life of the Christians by approaching them and teaching them Jewish traditions. Was this true or not? This was absolutely true. Let me tell you why. Jews are talking to former Jews who converted to Catholicism, because in the Jewish world, sometimes there is a herem, but given the situation that there is pressure to leave, and there's so much pressure and so much violence, when Jews converted, the Jewish families tried to stay in conversations with them so that they would not lose the connection with the Jewish community and the understanding of who they are. So in the eyes of the church and the crown, those people we are approaching are Catholic. We are going into a turf that's not ours. We are not supposed to, and we are disrupting their equilibrium, their normal life. So what they decide is that they have to eliminate the Jews. And there is this document signed on the 31st of March, 1492, giving the deadline to leave or convert. And if you found beyond the deadline and you did not convert, you are going to be killed. Until then, there's never been this instruction of convert or leave. If people converted, it was because there was a lot of pressure, duress, violence, etc. But there were choices, difficult choices, but there were choices. Obviously, this leaving Spain produced the diaspora of the Sephardim throughout the Mediterranean and then to Northern Europe. How many, we do not really know. Probably a couple 100,000 of Jews were living here, and half of them converted, half of them left. There's still debates, there's still incognita, it's unknown, it's totally unknown. So let's take a short walk in the Jewish quarter. What do we see today? We see that with the bars opening in the last 10 years, there's kind of jokes about it. You can read this. I find it to be graffitis I love. Sometimes they're very graphic. Sometimes they're very nasty, like this one from about 12 years ago. It was painted on the windows of the synagogue museum. We don't see swastikas anymore in this neighborhood. We see them somewhere else. There's this kind of nice dancing of the three faiths together. This other graffiti which lends to be misunderstood because one would like to read love Israel, but it says love is real. And I think it was made on purpose with a good intention. So going back to the map of Barcelona, or the map of Barcelona, yes, this is the cathedral. I'm gonna take you in on the street. We're gonna get to the government square. The port will be beyond, up on the photograph, and we're going to come into the Jewish quarter on the other yellow arrow, which was one of the entrances to the Jewish quarter. So we're going around the regional government, the Catalan government, into the Jewish quarter. This area was the former forum. The forum was much larger, but it was in this general area. And today, this is the center of government, as I said before. So all the street names changed when the Jews left the neighborhood. This used to be the street of the well. We are inside a few steps. The well used to be more or less here. We don't have any traces of the well, but it's by reference to other buildings and this reconstruction of the neighborhood. The building on the left, which is became an annex to the building on the right, run by the Catalan government. When they took the building, they gutted the whole structure open to the sky, and they, in excavating, trying to do a parking garage, they found the stubs of the walls from the Middle Ages, yes, and the structures of a very large storage facility that was owned by Masote Vangena, this man who had his own synagogue and converted in 1391. This was storage for grain, for corral, for silk buds, etc. He ran it in this structure. And up the street, when it gets a little narrower, close to the end of the street at the opposite end, there's no activity, as you can see. It's not just a store, and they sell the best kosher wines, but in the back, there is a room where they usually run before COVID, of course, they have art shows and they offer lectures on different topics. They present books, etc. All those dead-end streets that I mentioned before, the calles, were closed, taken over by construction, and many of them in the main dead-end streets were open, like this one. When we arrive in, this is the back street. I'm taking the picture on the back street. You can look onto the cathedral, but that was closed in those days. In the opposite direction, the street continues, and where these people are standing, if we look right, we will see the only dead-end alley, which is no longer dead-end, but the only Kyle that remains. They all have saints' names, as you can see, and we are going to later talk about one street that changed the names. So looking on an air view, we're coming from the left, and we're gonna make a left on the main street of the Jewish quarter, which was the street of the major synagogue, because the major synagogue was right up here. The tax collector also followed this route, but instead of going the yellow way, he went the white lanes, the white track, because this was not possible. This was a full block of buildings. This little square was not there in those days. The white, this broken street had one name from this point, and it was called the street from Masot Evangena Synagogue, which was here, to the French synagogue, which was here. That was the plain name it had. So making a left, we'll be going left in this photograph. The Masot Evangena Synagogue used to be where this building with a wall lamp is. And if we continue down the street, we will arrive at this little square, which is rather modern. The bombing during the Civil War caused this to be emptied out, and they created this small square. And in the last 10 years, as I said, we see all this cafe activity that was not there. I'm doing walks, I was doing walks for 20 years. I never saw this activity until 10 years ago. The building in the back is a branch of an annex of the History Museum of Barcelona to explain the Jewish history. And when we arrive in that corner, we will see that an old little doorway that was boarded up with brick and stone. In the renovation of this building, it's opened up, and we can see not even an artifact, we can see the trace of where an artifact used to be placed. This doorway is repurposed in this wall. It's not in its original location, but it is put together the same way it was built originally. It shows where a mezuzah in a Jewish house used to be placed. So if we turn around to the left, past the mezuzah door, we are on the last stretch of this street that used to be closed. And today it's called San Ramón del Cal. And Ramón refers to Ramón de Peñafort, a Dominican that we will talk about in a few more slides. Excuse me, before I talk about this, the French synagogue was where the street becomes dark, more or less here on the right. The mikveh was on one side or the other of the French synagogue. It's unclear still. And if we make a left turn at the end of this building where the mouse is, we are on a street that doesn't have a saint's name, the only one that doesn't in the Jewish quarter. And if we look at that building from here, you can see it's a very grand building. This building is built in 1820. When the building was completed, there was embedded on the wall, there were two pieces of stone. One is the translation of the other. A little higher up, you have this Hebrew marker, Hebrew inscription, which is the only Jewish artifact from the Middle Ages that you can see on the streets of the Jewish quarter. And it is not even the original, because the original was taken to the museum of the main museum of history. And this is an exact copy. I bring up to you, I do it when I do the walks. It's very interesting. We have to ask ourselves, what is this object doing here? The building is from 1800s. These two stones, Hebrew and its translation, with explanations that this is from the times when the Jews lived here, is put up in the wall. It's embedded, obviously, with the authorization of the owner, if it was not the owner's intention to begin with. Who in the 1800s, at a time when there are no Jews in Spain, and when talking about Jews, it's still like in a very pejorative way, who would have the nerve to put something like that with pride It's very interesting to start speculating because we do not know the name of the owner. The inscription reads what I wrote here, and the Nun Vet Tav are standing for an expression that could be Nishmato Boer Tanuach, or whatever expression of kavod towards Shmuel Hasardi, who was this member of the Beit Din, highly respected. Continuing on, we will go by the door into this basement to the left, where the major synagogue museum opened in 2002, being the first initiative to project or transmit information about the Jewish history in Barcelona in a space, because I was doing the walk since 1999, and this was the first space that you could walk in, and someone, in this case it's myself when I was much younger, will explain to you about the history. Note that the vault and the building above, also this wall, are from 1600s. The wall behind me, like the below the street level, the wall on the street side, is from the 1300s. But today we doubt that this was the actual location of the synagogue, because further research has located it on the building next door. This is happening in history and in research constantly, and a few years from today we may have some other news. What counts is that the Jewish quarter is there, and that this was the first, a Jewish initiative was the first time that someone could get some information about Jewish life. Coming to the corner and resuming walk on the street of the major synagogue, which today has another name that we will learn soon, this group is looking up this house on the left, the house of a very wealthy family, Abraham Adret, who also converted, as I showed you on the list, after the pogroms of 1300s. Probably direct descendant of Shlomo ben Adret, but it's impossible to know because Adret is a name that later branched out. The first two floors of this building are from the 1300s, and this building is now occupied by, it's like a hub of institutions that are interested in Jewish culture. It's called Casa Adret, and you have the Jewish Film Festival that has a little office, Mosaica, which is an association of young people who started in my congregation and later became an independent entity interested in disseminating Jewish culture. They just finished celebrating the Jewish book fair, Sefer. When the doors are open, they do open houses. When the doors are open to the public, you go beyond this first part into the courtyard, where there's now a metal stair, but there used to be a stone stair. If you turn around and look up, you're going to be able to see today they are windows, but they used to be doors, because there used to be the landing of the stair coming up to this corner. And if you pay attention, you will see the marks of the mezuzot that were placed on those two doorways. In this case, these doorways are not repurposed. The frames are there since they were built originally in the house. At the request of the Jewish communities in Barcelona and Jewish institutions in general, the city of Barcelona 2 years ago exactly, November 2018, approved renaming the street after Shlomo ben Adret. Only that I always have some T's to cross and I's to dot. They forgot to say he was a rabbi. He was not only a rabbi, he was the most important rabbi of his times in the Mediterranean, and that is why he was known as the Rashba. So when I go with very observant people and very Orthodox people, and I show them this name, they don't know him by that name. I think it was a big mistake, because Shlomo ben Adret is like John Doe, unless you say who he was. We are going to leave the Jewish quarter to make three more stops. So we're coming out. This is the circuit I took you through. I tried to. We're going to cross Government Square onto the other neighborhood where the Royal Complex used to be, right here, the cathedral right here. And we're going to go into this, okay, this is the way we are walking here. This is the view. And I'm going to take you into this square, And later we're coming out and come into this square. Where these people are, we're gonna make a right and arrive into that square, which you'll later see it better, because the royal palace or the royal complex changed a lot throughout the centuries, the century, since the 1100s when it was first built until today. And this is a photo of the King's Plaza in 150 years ago, 1850 something. Today, that looks like that. It's a very ample space. And the whole building of the royal complex, this building, this body, is run by the Museum of History of the city. And they have a main hall of the royal palace, which looks like this when it's empty. The main hall in the Middle Ages was 2/3 of this, like the building was 2/3 of that. It was not exactly this, but it was an ample hall. And I want to refer to Raymond of Peñafort, whose name goes on one of the streets of the old Jewish quarter, San Ramón del Cal. Raymond of Peñafort was a confessor of King James I. And although James I loved his Jews, he was convinced by Raymond that there should be a debate between a Jew and a Christian, so that there would be a contest between the two faiths. And this is how Moshe ben Nachman, living in Girona, the most important rabbi of the times, Shlomo ben Adret was a student of his, not yet the wonderful rabbi, respected rabbi he will become. Moshe ben Nachman comes from Girona to debate with Paul the Christian. That deserves a whole other session. Probably all of you know about this debate. And what's interesting is that it took place in this hall. What's more interesting is that 5 years ago, there was an exhibit of all those Haggadot that I mentioned before, calling it the splendor of, the Jewish splendor of Catalan Gothic, meaning that it was the expression of the artistic expression that was shining, was so excellent. And I wish this exhibit had been permanent. It really has a lot of material that deserves to be permanent, but it was only running for about 3 months. But what I liked is that this room saw a way of talking about Judaism that was not debating or arguing with the Christians. So going to the other, we go back to the street between the cathedral on the left and the royal complex on the right. And beyond these grills on the right in this photo and on the left in this other is the head of the big hall that we just saw, one of the ends of the big hall. This is a favorite corner for musicians. They are allowed to play here. It's a favorite place for young people to come and listen, to smoke marijuana and stuff like that. And no, not more than that. They are totally unaware that this building here on the side, still on the side street, still displays the icon of the Inquisition. In 1478, the Inquisition was established. In 1484, the kings gave this wing of the royal complex for the local offices, and the sign is still there, although the general building is used for a museum purpose. And on this wall, behind the musicians, you need to look very carefully, or you need someone to orient, to guide you, to find Hebrew letters. What are these doing there? These are fragments of our tombstones that were repurposed for the construction in 14, 15, 1600s. This is the only building where also in the basement part of the building where the Roman ruins are excavated and can be visited. Only place in Barcelona, a couple other behind, around the corner. The only place where you can see fragments of tombstones. The buildings built with our tombstones, in general in Spain, have also disappeared because they've been replaced by more modern buildings. So telling the story of the Jews, showing visible traces, is like putting the shards together after the Big Bang. I forgot after the Tzimtzum. If you understand what I'm talking about, it's a little pathetic. We have very little left, but yet the story is worth telling. So closing the loop, we arrive on the opposite end of where we started. And I hope you enjoyed the ride. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Would you mind unsharing the screen and we'll do a few questions?
I will.
So first question, how many tours have you given over the years of Jewish Barcelona?
How many tours? I don't know, but I have a mailing list of about 5,000 addresses times 4, let's say. I don't know how many people. How many tours? I don't know. I don't know.
A lot.
A lot. And I had not lost enthusiasm, except that in the last years, Barcelona died of success. Too many people, and the Gothic Quarter and the Sagrada Familia, probably. There are two focuses that attract all of the visitors. And the streets are very narrow. There's a lot of noise. It's not the same as when I started, that it was super quiet, and discovering something that no one else was pointing at was a real plus. Competition is ferocious, but this year we're not going out on the streets, and I don't know when we'll go back, and I don't know if I will want to go back. So if you're planning to come to Barcelona, maybe we sit in the hall of your hotel and we have tea elegantly sitting at a comfortable couch, and we talk about all this. We don't know what's going to happen, but I didn't lose the enthusiasm. That's true.
Just going back to the substance of what you talked about, were the Jews active in the court, like as advisors to the king?
Yeah, I mentioned that in passing. They were immensely trusted. We spoke languages, so it was good for diplomacy, negotiations. We spoke Arabic, Latin, Spanish, French, Catalan, of course, but Catalan was incipient. It wasn't a developed language yet. We were advisors in many other issues, and of course the doctors. I don't know, I said it, what's better than a Jewish doctor, right? So medicine, I don't know if I explained it. I don't remember if I did it in my dry run. Medicine was very advanced in the Muslim and the Jewish worlds, not as much in the Christian world, for the same reason. The body is created by God. It holds the soul. Jews and Muslims have to heal that body. Christians cannot touch that body because it is the creation of God. Medicine was very primitive in the Christian world. So doctors of the court were Jewish.
You mentioned that a very high percentage of the Jewish community was literate. Does that include the women in the Jewish community in Barcelona?
Women not only were they literate, they were business people. Some women inherited. Elka Klein is a woman who came from the United States to study documents here. She unfortunately passed away. She did wonderful work. She published extensively, and she speaks of women who are in business and manage the wealth of the family once the husband inherited. Yes. Excuse me, women taught the children to read and write, so they had to know.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
just to shift. Oh, talk about the Jewish badge that you showed. I'd never seen it with the red and the yellow. First of all, why was it round with red and yellow? And when did they start having to wear that in history?
I don't know why was it red and yellow, but it's the colors of all the flags in all the regions of Spain. All the combinations of shapes and colors are always red and yellow. I don't know why round. I think it's easier than sewing a star, if you understand where I'm going to. And when in the 1200s, when the preaching orders came up and the divisions and the tensions started to increase.
I don't know if I heard this. Can you explain why specifically in the 12th and 13th centuries things went bad?
Because the preaching orders are established. The preachers
are
these orders that go all over. This is after the Crusades. These orders that go all over Europe, trying to proselytize bring people into the church, the arms of the church. The church is also very afraid of the expansion of the non-Catholic Christians, Arianism. In the south of France, there's a lot of wars around that, the Cathars. This is another topic, but the church is very afraid of Catholics wanting to go back to a pre-Catholic stage and abandon the church, because the Christians before Catholic Church existed were much more humanitarian. Many said, I don't want to go to follow the church rulings and church doings because they are brutal. We want to continue studying and spreading the word of Jesus, which was a word of love and kindness. And the church was very afraid of this, and the preaching orders were doing the job to bring people into the church.
Were the Dominicans particularly the most aggressive against the Jews? And if so, why that order?
And don't ask me why I'm called Dominique. My mother's birthday would have been yesterday. My mother's yahrzeit was last Friday. And I always say, thank her for naming me, for giving me life and naming me whatever name. My mother fell in love with the character of a movie in the 1950s. That was, the character name was Dominique. And she said, my first child will be named like that. It's good for boy or girl, so that's how I was named. And every time I talk about the Dominicans, I said, well, maybe I'm doing teshuvah with this work and I will be forgiven, because it's a very Christian name. Dominique is a super Christian name.
Was it worse in Barcelona for the Jews or in Girona? In other words, did everything you were talking about 12th century affect the Jews in Girona? And was Girona really the precursor to the Jewish community in Barcelona? Was that really the major center in that area?
Girona is the first city to do a lot of advertising about their Jewish quarter. It's the first city where the mayor decided there is an important history to be told, and they had to gentrify the old Jewish quarter, which was the old part of the city, which included the Jewish quarter, and it was a completely abandoned part of town. And they decided to put an emphasis on the historical aspect of that city. They really succeeded. The old part of town is beautiful, but the buildings there are as modern as the buildings in Barcelona. The scholars there maybe are as many and as important as the ones in Barcelona. The population was much smaller. The peak of the Girona population, Jewish population, was 1,000 Jews. Barcelona was 4,000 Jews. The time that they were established in Girona is also the 800s. They were also living in a it's not even outside of town. It was in another village, and the count moved them to the city inside the walls. So it's not a precursor, not at all. I mean, they were kind of simultaneous, and in both cases, they may have come from other places of what used to be the Carolingian and the Charlemagne's empire.
So what's the population, the Jewish population in Barcelona today?
We say 5,000. I like to say we don't count. The only one who counts is God, right? Because we don't know how to count. Actually, in Spain, there may be about 20,000, although the numbers that go around are more, 30 probably. I think it's less than 20,000. But in Barcelona, I can tell you my congregation is less than 200 souls. The Orthodox congregation is probably 1,000, 1,200 souls. Chabad Lubavitch, they don't count. But for their Sederim, each time they have to rent a larger and larger hotel hall. And of course, they attract a lot of people who never go to any synagogue. Maybe there are 5,000, but affiliated no more than 2,500, 3,000.
And what brought the Jews back to Barcelona after 500 years?
Me? Jews or Jew? You said Jews.
Jews.
That's another topic. I can't explain all that. It's very long to explain. You know, I have a presentation about the return of Jews, the contributions of Jews to Spain in the 20th century. Barcelona, just to answer your question and be nicer to you, Barcelona was an attractive city for the climate, for the weather. And in 1929, Barcelona had a World Fair, and it projected the city to Europe, to European business people who came to the fair. And it was an attractive city where there were opportunities, or probably these Jewish people saw opportunities and they came here. But also usually Jews move when they need to move, not when they want to move, if you know what I mean. Jews arrived in Spain after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and then during World War II, after the arrival of Hitler to power, World War II, etc. So usually they start arriving here not because they want to return to Sepharad. There was never such a thing. No one returns to Sepharad. You come to Spain if you find that it's convenient for you, if you find something to do, and if you don't like where you are living at a given time.
Isn't there like some study been done about the population of Spain and what percentage has Jewish heritage? Do you know anything about that? What percentage they say?
Yeah, I don't get much into it because everybody talks about, I don't like bestsellers, if you know what I mean. There are studies. Most of Spanish population has either Muslim or Jewish genes in their DNA. And it's normal because there's always been mixing. There's never been a monolithic faith that does not mix with the others. We can read in documents from the Middle Ages lots of prohibitions of Christians cannot eat in the houses of the Jews or the other way around. It's happening. These things happen. Sometimes they marry to each other, and eventually it gives room to this inbreeding. And those who converted stayed and continued marrying those who had not converted. So this is, I don't know what percentage, but it's a true fact. But I'm sure that if you Google, you'll find better information than the one I can give you.
My understanding is that as you said, the Jews and Muslims interacted. And did the Jews learn their math and their astronomy from the Muslims, or did they teach the Muslims? Like you talked about a particular rabbi, you said, I don't know if you mentioned he invented pi, or did he learn that from the Muslim world and bring it to the...
He introduced it to Europe because all of these sciences were developed in the Muslim world. And it's basically the Jews who introduced most of that into Europe through Spain and then beyond into the rest of Europe. And something I did not mention, and it's the rationalist, the philosophy, the Greek philosophers that are heavily studied in the Muslim world and are transcribed in Arabic. They arrive into Europe through Spain also. When Muslims arrive here, they're very educated numbers of people who arrive here, and eventually there will be translations of those Greek philosopher texts from Arabic into Latin using the assistance of the Hebrew. Because when you translate, you need to have a lot of approaches to a text to be able to get the essence of that text. And this caused the Jews in the world of Islam in Spain, in the south of Spain, that was under Muslim domination for quite a while. This caused those Jews, Maimonides, who did not really grow up here beyond his bar mitzvah. He was not in Spain, but the influence of Muslim made Maimonides write the Moreh Nebuchim, for instance, which was a heavily rational approach to interpretation that was not accepted by the Jews in the northern part of Spain or the southern part of France, who were more mystical. So there was a controversy known as the Maimonidean controversy that ended up in fights of Jews on the streets, as if we needed headlines to say Jews are fighting. But that happened in those days. In the south of France, there were heavy fights, and eventually the Rashba, Shlomo ben Adret, was trusted to put an end to it, to solve this controversy. And with a Beit Din that he gathered, they studied this situation. And in 1304, they came up with the Herem of Barcelona, meaning a Herem, a prohibition. They concluded that Jewish men could not study anything but the texts that were already approved in the Jewish canon until after they turn 25, meaning before they are 25. So the Arab world brought a lot of culture to Spain. It influenced the Jewish thinking, influenced Jewish poetry. Jews discovered they could use Hebrew, not just for liturgy, because Hebrew was lost by then. The diaspora had caused Hebrew to be lost in so many centuries. Imagine Jews arrived here probably in the 800s, probably a little earlier, but we are talking in Barcelona about the 800s. And the Jewish poets and scholars start discovering that Hebrew can be used for poetry just as Arabic is used for poetry. And it's a very interesting product that it results in. I have not studied that in depth, but it's very interesting to understand this mix and this exchange of knowledge, opening up and allowing for the flourishing of both cultures.
Last question.
Yeah.
Last question. I know I've read about it going on in Portugal. Have you found in your community that there are people coming back to Judaism from Christianity? In other words, interested, finding out that they have Jewish heritage and coming back. Is that happening in Barcelona? Yeah, you've seen it in your synagogue. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we?
It is happening in Barcelona. As I think I told you before, yes, when we met in preparation, there's a woman, right, or I said it at the beginning, a woman who, I don't know if Irene Musas is her name. I don't know if Irene, I have to speak to her. If she knows she has Jewish roots or she just loves Judaism. She converted and went straight into rabbinical school. There's people who convert because they like Judaism, and there's people who convert because they know they have roots. There's people who convert because they discover that some of the small practices in the house relate to all Jewish practices. But I mean, what do I say small? Because there's no practice in hiding these days. There hasn't been practice in hiding for centuries. Only in the island of Mallorca, there are more of these individuals who know, they have known all along that they are descendants of Jews who converted by force, by law, actually. They converted automatically without them saying anything. They were converted. And for most of them, it's still stigmatizing they don't like to say they are the descendants of converts, because in the island of Mallorca, it's still very pejorative to speak about them. Only a few take it with pride. So there is a return or a coming into, not in large numbers, though.
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you. We had you stay extra time, so I appreciate you doing that. I know it's late for you in Barcelona, but we look forward to seeing you on our programs, because you do come. Dominique comes to many of our programs. You'll see her in the participant room with everybody else. So thank you for coming. Thank you for introducing yourself. And yes, I do hope you will tour again.
Thank you all.
And people will come and walk the streets and learn about the history of Jewish Barcelona. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all very much. I wish I could say hello to each one of you, maybe in the next session. Thank you, Ariel. Take care.
Welcome.
And until the next time. Bye-bye.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet many new people. Go to occsp.net to find out more about our programs, and have a great day. See you tomorrow. We're going to go to 20th century New York City. So
Yeah,
doing a lot of travel.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye, Susan Glass. Good to see you. Bye, everybody.